Hello YouTube, Stillborn86 here with another Linux video. A couple weeks ago I posted a walkthrough for Arch Linux, and in that video I ran through the gamut of taking an ISO, installing Linux, and running it in an XFCE desktop environment. And I kind of picked XFCE on a whim. It's just easy to install. It's one of the more common desktop environments. Actually, it's the Xforms common environment, so it is the common environment for Xforms. Even though it doesn't actually use Xforms anymore. That's beside the point. There'll be a video on that later. So I ran through that, and since I posted that video, I've had users asking me questions about other desktop environments. They've asked questions about the install process, and I actually had one publicly post asking about Pantheon and Unity, and it kind of made me think about my next string of videos and what I'm going to do. And I've decided that I'm going to make a series of videos for Arch, and I'm going to kind of break things up into the Arch install, the Arch configuration, downloading, installing different packages using the AUR, different desktop environments. I'm going to try to run through the gamut. And if anybody, finds something that they're confused about, or they don't completely understand, and they want help, or they would like a video on that topic, feel free to PM me. I'll try to help walk you through that. So right now we're going to run through once again the installation for Arch. And once again, I'm going to preface this by saying that you should never use any blog, any video, any write-up for Arch. You should always use the Arch manual page here. And that's because the manual page will give you the only truly credible source of Arch information. And it will give you the most up-to-date Arch information as well. Here you can find, an install guide, the beginner's guide, frequently asked questions, how to, contribute, everything. But today we're interested in the installation guide, so we're going to go ahead and follow that. I do highly recommend that you read this. This page right here will give you everything that you need to know about downloading and installing Arch on your system. That being said, I'm going to assume that you paused the video and did what I suggested, and we're going to start moving. I am going to install Arch on a virtual machine, so I'm going to create a new machine. I'm going to name it Arch. It's going to automatically populate with Linux and Arch 32-bit. I'm choosing to do 32-bit to minimize the amount of RAM and swap space I need. If you choose 64-bit, you're going to need more RAM, which is inherently going to cause you to need more swap space, but we'll hit that when we get to it. So I'm choosing 32-bit. I'm going to set it to 512 megabytes of RAM because I don't need that much. This is going to be a minimal install. Virtual hard disk, VDI, that'll be fine. Dynamically allocated, 8 gigs will be plenty of room for us. At least for me. You can use whatever you want. And I'm going to go ahead and start. It's going to ask me to point to an Arch ISO, and I've already pointed to it. I've downloaded it, and here's the ISO. I am using the 0701 2015 ISO. You can use whichever one you want. Arch is a rolling distro, so everything should stay up to date. The only thing, the install process should be pretty similar regardless of what you use. And all the packages will download the newest package when you install, and we'll get to that here in a second. So we're going to click Start. It's going to unpack. It's going to do its thing. I can actually minimize this and bring this out of the way. Since I picked a 32-bit system, it's going to show i686 only. If you picked a 64-bit system, it would do that as well. It would give you that option. It also gives you the option to boot an existing OS. That's a very powerful tool for if you screw up Arch. If you edit something or download something or change something and it totally screws up your build, You can always put the ISO on a USB disk, boot into it just like we just did, and then come down here to boot existing OS and run that way. But since we don't have an OS and nothing's broken, we're not going to do that. We're going to boot into Arch i686, which is the 32-bit version of Arch. It's going to unpack everything, and it should automatically log us into root, which should be coming up here in a second. Takes a little bit. Starting version 2.2.1. Actually, it's on 2.2.3, I believe, but we'll see here in a second. I say a second. It'll be a few minutes. Welcome to Arch. Everything seems to be okay. I lose my mouse in the window. Hate that. Arch root, automatic login. Good. So we're in. I'm going to take a second to change my keyboard. Locale control set key map no convert. I'm going to change it to a Dvorak because I can't type with this keyboard. And so we should be good. Okay. Now the first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to check your what kind of disks you have. So you're going to need fdisk-L, and if you just did this, it's actually going to scroll too fast for you to read anything. There's actually data up here that just scrolled off screen, and there's a way to scroll up and see that. I think it's Control-Shift. Oh no, that's not right. I can't remember what the keys are in terminal. But there's data up here, so I'm going to actually fdisk-L. I'm going to pipe that into less so that I can scroll down and scroll back up. Here at the top you can see the 8 gig hard drive that I created, and it's at dev SDA. Yours may be SDB or SDC. You may have multiple hard drives connected to your system. Whatever setup you have, you're going to want to look for the drive that you want to install to and what it's labeled as. So we're at dev SDA, so we can hit Q to quit out of this, and we want to start partitioning. cfdisk /dev SDA. Again, if you were SDB, you do SDB, but we're SDA, so we're going to do that. I'm going to use the GPT, the guided partition table, so I'm going to hit enter. And as you can see here at the far right, we have 8 gigs of free space here. So you can right and left. I'm going to select new in the free space, and I'm going to change that to 7 gigs for our file system. So that means I have 7 gigs to play around with and load packages and install stuff. And then down here I still have 1023 megabytes of free space, which is one megabyte shy of a gig. And I did that on purpose because, again, like I mentioned in the beginning, we're going to need to create swap space. We're going to need to create swap space. A good general rule of thumb is to create twice as much swap space as the RAM you have. So I created 512 megabytes of RAM, so 1024 swap space is good, or 1 gig. I'm doing a megabyte less, so that should be okay. The swap space is kind of a highly debated idea. Some people do fixed amount of swap space, some people do more, some people do less. It's really all up to you. Personally, I don't care if you don't have any swap space, but the purpose of swap space is to for your system to manage memory. When it pages memory out of your RAM, or when your computer goes into hibernation mode, it utilizes a swap space. So let's say this page back here is loaded in my RAM. All this text that I've saved into this note is loaded in my RAM, and then if I close the lid on my laptop and my computer goes into hibernation mode, it'll cut the power off to my RAM. And if you know how RAM works, RAM doesn't retain memory without power. So then I've lost my text file, and I've lost the page and all the tabs that I've opened. I've lost all of my information. What Linux does is it takes all that information and it loads it into this partition in your hard drive devoted strictly to swap space, and it swaps out all your RAM into that swap space. And then when you wake your computer back up from hibernation mode, it takes that out of swap space and puts it back into your RAM. So it's used for that. It's also used for paging your RAM and all your memory. You can look up what that all does. It's a long explanation, but again, it's a good general rule of thumb to do twice as much swap space as your RAM. I have 8 gigs worth of RAM in this laptop, so I have 16 gigs worth of swap space in this laptop. So you can do whatever you want. Again, I don't care if you have no swap space. That's going to really suck for your computer, but if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. So I'm going to again go back here, tab over to new. I'm going to use all of the memory. It automatically populated, and I'm actually going to go to type, and I'm going to go up to swap and change it to swap. So now I have 7 gigs right here at the top at SDA1 for the file system, and I have 1 gig at SDA2 for the swap. So I'm going to go over here to write, and I'm actually going to type out yes. Y is not good enough, and N is not good enough. You actually have to type out fully YES or NO. I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to go over here to quit, and I should be good. If you wanted to check, you can always, fdisk-l less, and here you can see at the SDA 8 gig we have SDA1 at 7 gigs and SDA2 at 1 gig. So it did write, it's good. The next thing we're going to want to do is make a file system, so mkfs. We're going to make this into an ext4 file structure, and since we created the file system at SDA1, we're going to write this at SDA1. It's going to take a second to do that, and it's done. Now we're going to mount SDA1 to the MNT mount point. Okay? This way we have access to the hard drive through the ISO. Before we actually get into that, we're actually going to create swap space as well. Well, we created the swap partition. We're actually going to now make the swap space. So mk swap at dev SDA2, again, because that was the partition, SDA2. And again, if you were SDB, it would probably be SDB2. But SDA2 for our swap space. And we're going to turn the swap on for dev SDA2. So now all your partitions have been set up. Everything is in line. Let's actually go back here to make sure we've done everything. Set keyboard layout, we did that. Partition disks, we did that with GPT. Format the partitions, we created the file system and the swap partition. We mounted the partition. Now it says to connect to the internet, and I don't know why this is here. It actually should be at the very bottom down here, and I'll show you that here in a second, because if we ping Google, we're actually connected to the internet now. I don't know why it wants you to connect up here. That's kind of dumb, but whatever. So now that we've mounted right here, we mounted the hard drive to the MNT point, we can actually start loading packages. Now I'm gonna run the packstrap function at the mount point, and here's where you start installing Linux, okay, and Arch Linux at that. Technically, all you need for Arch is the base package, so BASE. You're also going to need a bootloader, and again, this is kind of out of order because down here at the bottom it wants you to install a bootloader, but up here it says all you need is packstrap base. Technically that's true, but since I'm installing packages, I'm going to install a bootloader as well. So technically all you need is base and grub. I'm actually going to install base devil as well, because I'm going to use this build to test desktop environments, and I'm going to need the Arch user repository for that. So base devil. Oh, no. Base devil actually gives me access to the Arch user repository. So I'm going to do these 3 packages: base, devil, and grub. I'm also going to do these packages here. Because I know I'm going to do a GUI, and because I'm going to do sound, I'm going to need the X11 display server. So xorg xinit xorg server xorg server utils and xorg apps. Is that everything? 4 of them. Okay, and then I'm going to do all those 4 are for your what do you call it? Your X11 display server. That way you can run a GUI, you can run a desktop environment. ALSA is a sound configuration package. You can do Pulse Audio, you can do ALSA. I like ALSA, so I'm going to do that. The next set of packages, Vim, wget. Vim is just something for me. I don't like using Nano, so I'm going to do Vim. Wget actually helps you download files and packages from the internet. So since I'm going to use the Arch user repository, I'm going to need to download tarballs, which means I need wget. And then p7zip, unzip, zip. Those are let me type those in. Unrar. Those are all package managers, to zip and unzip all your files that you download with wget. You don't need them, but they're nice to have when you do. And then at the bottom, they're just stuff for me. I'm going to do less pipe, fortune mod, because I like having I like having a cow tell me fortunes every time, because I'm gimmicky like that. I'm going to do Firefox, so that every time we install and start up a new GUI, we can make sure the internet still works. And I'm going to actually ignore this last part, VirtualBox guest utils. You don't need that yet, and I'll explain that later. So once you've typed out all the packages you want to install, you can install anything you want. You want Tmux, space Tmux. You want LibreOffice space LibreOffice fresh. You can install whatever you want. I'm going to do a pretty basic install here. Again, all you really need is base and a bootloader. Base Devil gives you gives you AUR access. Your Xorg stuff gives you the X11 display server. Also gives you sound. Vim is a text editor. wget lets you download files from the internet without having a browser. Since the terminal emulator doesn't actually have a browser. These all pack and unpack compressed files, and then these are just packages for me because I want them. So I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to start syncing the databases, and then here it should, in a second, it'll pop up with all the there they are. This whole body up here, and even stuff that's hidden up here, those are all the packages and discrepancies for packages that it's going to download. You can see a whole bunch of Xorg stuff. That's all your X11 display stuff. And down here, this whole body, it's actually downloading the packages. This is actually going to run a while, so I'm going to let this run. It'll be a good several minutes before it's done on my connection, and I have an all-right connection, so it may take longer for you. I'm going to pause the video, and I'd suggest you do the same, and I will come back when the download is done and we have a root prompt down here once again. So I will see you guys in a little while. Alright guys, we're back. It looks like everything installed. Down here I have root prompt again. So we're back into Arch. Everything, all those packages that I listed, over here, they have all installed. So the next thing we're going to want to do, we're going to want to get into our system, Arch chroot, and we're going to point to the mount point since that's where our hard drive is. And as you can see, our shell prompt has changed from root to shell. That means we're in. Now the first thing I like to do is change the password with PASSWD. That's because right now the root user doesn't have a password, and that's extremely insecure. As you can see, when we logged into the shell as a root user, it didn't prompt us for a username or password or anything, it just let us in. So we're going to change the password and make it ask us for a password. Now I know you can hear my keystrokes. Don't be alarmed if you can't see any characters showing up. That's just how Linux and Unix are. Password updated successfully. Now this password is going to be extremely important to keep. Don't lose this one. If you do, you're going to play hell trying to find it. You're trying to get your data back, because this is the password to have. You can pretty much lose any other password except for this one. So that's a very important one. Let's go in and create our locale. So I'm going to use Vim. Again, you can use Nano, but I installed Vim, so I'm gonna Vim into etc locale.gen, and we're gonna go down here. I'm gonna jump a couple lines here to English US, because I am in the United States and obviously I speak English. So I'm going to uncomment these lines. You're going to want to scroll down. It's all in alphabetical order. You're going to want to find the keyboard and language that you use and uncomment it. These octothorpes here, the first character in each line, means that all the lines are commented out and they are ignored by the system. So if I delete the octothorpes in these two lines here, these two are no longer commented and they're actually read by the system. Everything else with an octothorpe is ignored. So again, since I'm in the US and I speak English, these are the two lines that I'm focused on, and I'm going to :X enter to write, and then I'm going to generate my locale file, locale gen, and it should generate from those two lines that I uncommented. Done. You're going to want to uncomment the two lines that apply to you, to your keyboard and your language, but those two apply to me, so we're going to do that. Next, we're going to set our time zone. So you want to cd into the user share zone info, and we're going to ls, and that's going to list a bunch of countries and nations and areas around the world, and actually some time zones. And again, I'm in the US, so over here on the far right in the top, US. So we're going to cd into the US. This is case sensitive, so make sure you focus on that. You pay attention to that. We're going to ls again, and it's going to give us time zones in the US. Now I'm on the East Coast, so I'm going to pick Eastern over here. So I'm going to run ln-sf user share zone info, because that's where we were. I'm going to pick the US and Eastern, right? Because that's my time zone. Essentially what we did up here is we found the route to my time zone, which is Eastern in the US. So it was, up here, user share zone info, right here, US, and then Eastern. So user share zone info, US Eastern. Do whatever applies to you. Let me move this up so that doc doesn't keep getting in the way. Do whatever applies to you, but this applies to me, so we're going to run it. And I'm going to put this into etc local time. Enter, and it's done. So we're there. Now we're going to give our computer a name, okay? I'm going to echo the name, let's call it Arch Virtual Machine. And we're going to put that into, again, etc hostname. You can name it whatever you want. I named mine Arch VM. That's me. Name it, Nipples the Panda if you want. I don't really care. That's for you. So now that our computer has a name, let's add a user. Technically, you don't have to do this. You can log in as root all the time, but that's really unsafe and not a smart idea. So I'm going to create a user. I'm going to do that with user add -m-g, and I'm going to add this user to the users group, which a crazy idea, I know. And then I'm going to add them to the wheel subgroup, and that's going to be in bin bash. And then I'm going to name this user my handle, stillborn86. I didn't type add correctly. ADD, because I have ADD. Not really, but anyway. Bad joke. So user add gave me no errors, so Stillborn86 is now a user, which means Stillborn86, like the root user used to, doesn't have a password. Let's go ahead and passwd Stillborn86, and now it's going to ask for a password. I'm going to type in a password. Updated successfully. I choose to make this password different from my root password. A lot of people don't. They'll use the same password for both, which is really dumb in my opinion, but you know, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. I choose different passwords because I like my computer to be secure. So yeah. So anyway, now that we have changed the password and set up a user and changed the password, we're going to want to add them to the sudoers file so that they can use sudo to gain root access from time to time. So I'm going to use Vim again. You can use nano. Etc sudoers, and then down here, scroll down to find wheel up here, and again there's an octothort, meaning that the wheel line is commented out. We want to uncomment that, and we want to ignore this wheel no password. What this means is that if we run sudo with the user we just created, since they're part of the wheel group, it won't prompt them for a password. They can run root commands all day long with no password, and that's really insecure. I'm not going to do that. So I'm uncommenting wheel. This way it prompts them for a password. So we're going to go ahead and write out to that. And then what else do we have to do? We have to, let's do sound. So also mixer. Since we installed also already, we can right and left to pick the different columns, and up here by item there is a gain level. We're going to change the gain to 0 or as close to 0 as we can for all of these to get a baseline sound level. And for most of these it's just going to be maxed out to get there. Some of them it's not going to be. Like this one's actually not going to be maxed out. This one's going to be far from maxed out. Positive 1.5. 0. Now you may have more or less columns than I do. Each system's a little bit different depending on your hardware and kind of firmware you have. This virtual machine apparently has a whole bunch of options for me to do. Now that everything's set the way I want it, I want to hit the escape button and it will automatically save everything. So now that we have our sound, we have users, I'm going to actually install grub. We downloaded the package and we installed the package, but we haven't installed grub to the hard drive. So we're going to run grub install, and we're going to run that on dev sda. Now again, you can do sdb if that's what you want, or even sdc if that's where you are, but we're at sda, so we're going to run it. And actually I'm kind of dumb because I know it's going to fail. Right now I'm running a virtual machine, so I have no BIOS, and I don't have a BIOS boot partition, so it's going to fail. So I'm going to actually force this. I don't recommend you do this for an actual machine, but for a virtual machine, since I don't have BIOS, forcing is what I'm going to do. I can create a BIOS partition, but I don't want to waste any more memory than I have to. Finish, no error reported, so we're good. Next, we're going to want to make an init cpio mk, init cpio -p Linux, and this is actually going to pull firmware and make a firmware list. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I'm really tired. I'm sorry. Profiles for all the firmware, and it's going to error out twice here because there's a couple modules that we don't have. They're not important. You can look up what AIC 94XX and WD719X are. They're pieces of hardware that don't exist on this virtual machine. They're not very important, and they're not critical to running Arch. I think there's some trivial pieces of hardware like a Bluetooth device or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, Now that that's done, we're going to make a config file for grub so it'll actually install mk config o-boot grub.config, and this should only take a second, and it's done. And now we're done with the actual shell. We can exit and go back to the ISO root. Here we want to generate a file system table, essentially like a table of contents for what composes your hard drive. So we're going to generate file system table -pmnt into mnt etc fs tab, and it's done. That was pretty quick. We're done now, so we can unmount with umount r the mount point. This will take just a second, and we're done. And we can exit out with the shutdown command, hnow, and it's gone. So at this point we can go in here and take the disk or the ISO out of the virtual disk drive. Okay, and so when we start this, it should boot directly into grub. There it is. It wants to do Arch Linux. I can be patient, wait 5 seconds, or I can hit enter and just boot it immediately. I'm going to do that because I'm not patient. Loading Linux. See, there's version 2.2.3. I told you we'd see that, and it has been a few minutes. And it's been a good... Has it been an hour? I don't know, something like that. So here we are at the login screen. Now here you can log in as root and use that first root password you created, or you can log in as your user and use the second password you created for that user. I'm going to do that to make sure we used that sudoers file correctly. Here you can see we're logged in as stillborn86 at ArchVM. That's correct, with the username and the echoed computer host name. Here, let me take a second to change the locale control, the keyboard again, because I can't type on this to save my life. No convert. It takes so much. What am I doing here? Locale, CTL, set. Oh, I need to be root. Sudo. There we go. Now we can test our password. It seems to have worked. So we edited the sudoers file correctly, and now my keyboard is exactly the way I want it. So I've knocked 2 birds out with 1 stone. So the next thing we want to do, well, actually before we move on, let's look at this. Pre-installation, we changed the keyboard, partition disk, made file system a swap space, mounted partition. Again, connect to the internet was not what we wanted to do. Mirrors, your mirror list, you could do that if you have a problem. When if you try to run Packstrap and it doesn't actually download, it just errors out. Your mirror list is probably wrong. Most of your new ISOs should automatically uncomment everything. So etc pacman.b mirror list. I should have done this back before. You can see here that all the server lines are uncommented. There's no octothorpe for them, so that they're all open. It's going to check all the servers. So, there's no reason in my mind to edit the mirror list, yourself, unless you're doing something very specific and you know what you're doing. I was not gonna do that. Then we packstrap to install packages. We generated a file system table, arch root. Actually, we did this last, but it doesn't really matter. We went into the system, set a computer name, ArchVM, LN, we set a time zone, LNSF, where we, zone info, US, Eastern. Locale gen. This right here is not very important unless you're using a totally different language. Make init CPIO. Then we change the password, which I did way up here when I rooted. I did when I arch-ch root and logged in. I changed the password immediately. Then it wants you to install a bootloader. We did that with packstrap. Then it wants you to unmount, umount R, and then reboot. So we did all that. We followed the Arch Wiki without actually following the Arch Wiki. Now that we're here, let's make sure the internet works. c3google.com, nothing. Which again, I don't understand why it's up here to connect to the internet when we were connected and now we're not after we've rebooted. So let's set up wireless. We're going to change directory into etc netctl. Change directory into etc and netctl examples. And if you ls, it's going to give you a list of pre-configured profiles for your wireless and your Ethernet and bridging and everything. Since I don't have a wireless card, I'm going to run the Ethernet DHCP dynamic IPs. So I'm going to sudo copy Ethernet DHCP into etc netctl, and then I'm going to back out into netctl. As you can see here, stillborn archvm netctl. If we ls, there's your examples folder, and then there's the Ethernet DHCP file we just copied over. So now that we have this, we're going to edit the Ethernet DHCP with our hardware configuration. But first we need to find that. So we're going to IPA, and we're going to have LO, and then we're going to have E for Ethernet, ENP0S3. You could have a W for your wireless. You could have any kind of configuration. I don't have a wireless card on this virtual machine, so we're just going to do Ethernet, ENP0S3. You're going to want to write that down. If you had a wireless card, it would be WLP0S2 or something like that. Write that down. But I don't, so ENP0S3. So we're going to sudo vim Ethernet DHCP, and then down here at the interface, at the end it's ETH0. We're going to go ENP0S3 because that's our actual hardware. We don't have an Ethernet 0. We have ENP0S3. So we're going to write this out. Let's clear the workspace. So if we do sudo, so we have root, and we do network control netctl, we want to start the Ethernet DHCP profile. If you hit enter, it should give you no errors. If it did, you messed up somewhere. You didn't type in the right Ethernet hardware address or something. But it should give you no errors like it just did. So now we should have internet. Ping c3google.com, and it's actually pinging. Okay, no unknown host. Good. Now the problem with this is once I reboot the computer, it stops netctl. So we want that to be persistent through reboots. So in order to do that, we're going to sudo again, netctl, and instead of start, we're going to enable Ethernet DHCP. And it doesn't say there are any errors, so Ethernet DHCP is on. You can check with systemctl type equals service, and here netctl at Ethernet DHCP service, it's active and it's excited, loaded, active, and excited. So we're good. It's there. Q to clear out, to quit out of that, and then clear to clear the workspace. So now we have internet, we have a user, we need to set up our display. To do that, it's lspci-k. We're going to pipe that into grep so we can actually read this. Dash capital A 2 dash I VGA. And up here in the corner, it says I have a VirtualBox graphics adapter. Okay? and that's not surprising because I'm running this in VirtualBox. It could say that you have an Intel graphics card, an ATI, or an NVIDIA graphics card. You could have essentially anything. But I have VirtualBox, so I'm going to install the VirtualBox graphics utils, which is this thing I told you we'd come back to later. To do that, you need to be root and use your package manager, use the argument to synchronize or download, and then you're going to want to download the right package for you. If you have Intel, it's going to be XF86 video Intel. Not very difficult. If you have an ATI card, it's not very different. ATI, that's it. XF86 video ATI. If you have an NVIDIA card, I'm sorry because that's going to really suck, but NVIDIA, that's all you need to do. Those tend to break with Arch a lot during updates. And then for me, since I have VirtualBox, it's VirtualBox guest utils. If I can type in virtual. And it's there's VirtualBox guest utils and a version number over here on the right, and then a dependency over here on the left. So it's going to be 2 packages that are installed. I'm going to click yes to install them. It's going to retrieve packages. It's going to suggest things that I may want to load. I'm not actually going to do that because VirtualBox is going to work correctly. And it's done. So now that we have that, technically, you're done. This is Arch. This is all Arch is a command line. This is C3 Google. This is Arch. You're running Arch Linux. You're done. Don't get me wrong when I say that this is all Arch is. This is not all Arch could be. It's all Arch is. Technically, Arch can be so much more than this. The desktop that I'm running is actually Arch itself. This is XFCE and Arch. I have Conky over here on the right. I have a Docky down here, Notepad over here. I've got a few things going on at the same time. Arch can be so much more than this. And it can be more than what I have. I've just created this very simplistic view for me. But this is Arch. This is what Arch is, and it's kind of the building block for what you want. In the next several videos of this series, I'm going to be installing different desktop environments, different packages, different options, different configurations, so that you can make Arch something that you're going to enjoy, something you're going to use. But right now you're technically done. You can make folders, you can remove folders, you can update your system, which it shouldn't do because there's nothing to do right here. It's already updated. You can configure Arch any way that you want. Technically you're done. I am going to do one more step, one caveat here. Since we installed the Xorg files, we installed the X11 display server. I am going to bring my xinitrc file over. So what I'm going to do is cp etc x11 xinit xinitrc, and I'm going to copy that to the home folder as a hidden file, xinitrc. And now I have xinit ready to go. So that's Arch. You can reboot, or you can shut down, halt now, or you can explore Arch. Well, sudo. I hope that was a great learning experience for you, and I hope you were able to get that working, so we can continue with the next set of videos. Stillborn86 out.